Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of GSO's Ocean Classroom Live. This is our ninth in the series of programs that we've kicked off a few months ago, and it is the third and final episode of a little itty-bitty mini-series we've decided to dedicate towards sharks, our fascination towards them, and the incredible people who study them. And we've created this ocean classroom, again, to inform and engage us each a bit deeper into the ocean, the animals who live there, and the people who conduct that critical research that broadens our understanding of the largest habitat on our home, this blue planet of ours. So the stories we're going to listen to today, I'm really glad you're here. We're going to draw important connections between our skewed sense of diversity with sharks and a much deeper issue, the lack of representation for people of color in shark sciences, and how that lack of diversity reflects choices, whether intentional or not, that have a real impact in how people can relate and consider themselves as worthy members of trying to start a career in science. So again, I'm really glad you're all here today, but before we introduce our guests, let us know where you're coming in from. Let's start this right off. These are interactive programs, and what we want to do is we want to see where our audience is engaging from. So in the chat box, whether you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube, right in there, and we'll be able to bring those comments on in a little bit and see where you're all coming from. And while you're at it, we do want to keep doing these programs. We enjoy doing them. We have a lot of fun bringing in really interesting people and having these conversations. So if you can, like us on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, and then you'll get notified when each of the next Ocean Classroom episodes come up. So like my title said, I'm Alex. I work at the Inner Space Center here at the Graduate School of Oceanography. And today our conversation is being brought to you by the Devereux Ocean Foundation. So thanks again for your support. And let's go right into it. Oh, cool. So we have some people coming in. Emma from WZ. And maybe we can have some more come in as we get in there. So Long Island represented here. This is great. North Carolina, hey, Tony. This is awesome. So, and from Florida, which is good. Maybe you'll know some of our guests today. So I want to throw out another prompt for all of you. When it comes to the animal kingdom, there's a ton of diversity there, right? We see these different types of animals all over the place, but there are some weirdly and interesting shaped animals out there, and some of the ones that come to mind: giraffes, aardvarks, anteaters, these funky creatures that present different questions in our head of like, why did this animal develop this way? Why did they need to sort of get these adaptations? And well, another prompt for everybody out there is, we'd love for you, like, pick your brain a little bit, think about the animal kingdom, and write in the comments section of some of those like oddly shaped animals. So that brings us to our very first guest, Jasmin Graham. And I wanted to introduce her because she is someone who has dedicated her career as a scientist to studying some of these oddly shaped creatures, but when it comes to the sea. Jasmin, it's so great to have you here. How are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm good. Really excited to be here.
Awesome. So, okay, oddly shaped creatures, oddly shaped animals. You have one that is a little bit near and dear to your heart. Tell us a little bit about it and why this sort of animal why did it spark your curiosity?
So I started out my career in shark science studying a group of animals called hammerheads. So a lot of people kind of know the hammerheads, and they have these weird heads. Their heads look like hammers. And so when I first started looking into this, that was a big question that I had. What's up with the hammers? How did they get them? Why do they have them? What's going on there? So I started doing a lot of research on the evolution of hammerhead sharks. And then once I finished that, I continued my studying of strangely shaped shark skates and rays. And I went on to study the small-toothed sawfish, which also is another oddly shaped critter. It actually has a giant saw-like nose on the front of its face. So I've always been intrigued by animals with weird shapes.
That's phenomenal. So like, okay, the sawtooth, the sawfish. So tell us a little bit about what that animal looks like. So you said it has a saw that, just
Yes,
describe it, because I
I
think we have it
have.
here. We're looking at a picture
Yeah,
here of it.
there you go. So it's Yeah, it's a ray, so it's super flat. Mouth and gills are on the bottom, so that's how you can tell that it's a ray. A lot of people think it's a shark. It does have some shark-like features. So it is flat like a ray, and its mouth and gills are on the bottom. But if you look at its tail and dorsal fins, those are very shark-like, and the way that they swim is very shark-like. And then on top of that, they have this giant thing on the front of their face, which we call a rostrum, and it has all of these teeth-like things coming off of it, which it uses for hunting and defense and finding prey and things like that.
What an adaptation. What an animal.
Yeah.
Are they fun? Are they interesting to work with, like in that photo that we just saw? Are they interesting, like when you're actually physically working with the animal?
Yeah, they're very interesting. I think that they're super interesting because when you look at them from the top, they look super intimidating. They've got like these kind of slitty eyes that are kind of peering up at you. They've got this big thing on the giant weapon on the front of its face. So it looks super intimidating. And then if you flip it over, which we do to do surgeries and things like that, because it puts it into tonic immobility, which basically is like it's in a trance. It's kind of like half asleep. So when you flip it over, its little mouth is just like super cute and derpy. It's like got a little constant smile. Like, so it just looks so happy. So you look at it from the top and it's like, oh man, I don't want to mess with that guy. And then you flip it over and it's like, I'm sorry, friend, did I scare you? So I love it. Some people refer to them as danger snoots, which is a great name because they have snouts that appear dangerous. So I like the term danger snoot to describe them.
Oh, I bet you the Sawfish is grateful for not only your descriptions, but also for your research on them. So one thing you mentioned before, Jasmin, was you started to be really fascinated by hammerhead sharks. And I believe there's an image that we can sort of pull up here. And can you tell us, like, when it comes to hammerhead sharks, why these types of adaptations, and really what the image that we're going to pull up, what does this mean for you? And yeah, here it is. It's gorgeous, and it sort of presents a lot of questions in my head. So maybe just talk a little bit about what this is and what this means.
So this is a winghead shark. This is the hammerhead shark with the widest head. So their head, the width of their head is about 3/4 the length of their body, which is like an excessively wide head. So you look at that thing and you say, why? Why do you have that? What's up with that? That seems like a lot of weight. And so the funny story about that, so that's a CT scan, and it took one of my collaborators so long to find a picture or a specimen of a winghead shark that's neck wasn't broken, because its head is so heavy that, like, whenever you try to take a sample, take a specimen, the head twists because the animal isn't holding its head up anymore, and it just like snaps its neck. And you're like, what? That just seems inefficient. Your head is so heavy that if you're not holding it up, your neck breaks. That's kind of ridiculous. So I was very interested in studying these guys. And the way that I did that was anatomical data. So I took the CT scans and I did what's called digital segmentation. And I believe you guys have a photo of the actual skeletal structure. So this is what it looks like when it's segmented. So I actually take out individually all of these different structures. So sharks are made out of cartilage. We CT scan them on a CT scanner meant for people, and people are made out of bones. So the CT scan doesn't always come out super clean. So I actually have to go in and digitally segment, and I have to actually eyeball. I did a lot of studying of what these structures look like and their shapes and things like that. So I actually go in and manually identify each structure and pull it out. And you can see this video here. This is like real time. This is actually what I do. So you go in and you remove all of the other pieces that aren't the part of the body that you're actually interested in. And you look for the joints and things where the structures are connecting. And isolate each individual structure, and you go one by one. So this is me isolating one structure in this shark. So I do that for every single structure, and that's how you end up with that beautiful image that you saw previously.
And it's really incredible, actually, to see how much effort goes into creating that image, right? It's not just sort of a quick scan and then throw it up there. That this is really a specialty. So it kind of brings up another question for me. How many hammerhead sharks are there actually? And is this something that is very easily known? And let's throw it out to everybody while we're out there. How many species of hammerhead sharks are there? Let's see if we can get any questions from the audience. But Jasmin, while we're letting those brew a little bit, hammerhead sharks, is there a large diversity? Is there a huge set of them? Maybe don't give away too many clues.
Yeah, I won't give away the answer, but I will tell you that they recently found more. So there were two. Well, there was one that was described, and it was described a long time ago, and people kind of were like, "Oh, that's actually the same animal as this guy over here. It just has white tips on its fins, but it's actually the same thing." So they thought that it was just like a difference of, like, sometimes sharks are different colors in different places. But we actually did the genetics and figured out that it's actually a distinct species. And then there's a hammerhead shark that is called a cryptic species. So a cryptic species is a species that looks exactly like another species, but they're in fact separate species. So we have recently found a cryptic species of hammerheads. So now at least there's at least three, because there's one that looks like one with white tips, there's one that looks exactly like one, and then there's the original.
For me, that's already learning more than I came in today. I thought there was only one. But so we brought in Twitter into this, and we raised the question. We asked how many people, how many types of hammerheads are there? And most people fell in that range of what you just described, 2 to 4. Some people said 5 to 10. Some people a little bit said over 10. So what do we think, Jasmin? Let's break any misinformation here.
So all of you that said 5 to 10, you are correct. There are 10 species of hammerheads.
10 species of hammerheads, and some that are still discovering new ones.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So, and it just shows, like, there are the diversity of sharks is so often underrated. It's something that we don't necessarily, we might take this for granted, that we think, the sharks that get the most attention don't represent all of the sharks that are out there, because there are many known species of sharks. How many known species of sharks are there?
More than 400, and we find new ones all the time.
Wow. And what are we looking at here?
So this is the Chondrichthyan tree of life. So chondrichthyans are all fishes that are made of cartilage, so sharks, skates, and rays. So what you're looking at is the current hypothesis of how all sharks, skates, and rays are related to each other. So you can see we have tons of species there.
Wow. And I love too the way that you have to put it. It's the current hypothesis. Still so much more to learn, which brings us to introducing our next guest, Triana Arguedas Alvarez. Hello, Triana. Nice to see you.
Hi.
Thanks for hanging out.
Nice to see you too.
So one thing, Triana, that we wanted to bring you in for is, when it comes to sharks and all of these different types of sharks, your work actually looks at where these sharks go and how they're moving through international borders. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why that's important?
Yeah, so I currently am trying to reconstruct approximate bull shark catches in the Mexican Atlantic. So as we know, the Gulf of Mexico actually shares territory, official marine territory, with 3 countries, the United States, Cuba, and Mexico. So this can cause quite a conundrum when we are trying to figure out exactly how many sharks are living in this vast kind of enclosed area. And it's hard to figure out where these sharks go, because NOAA classifies several species of sharks as highly migratory. So they can be crossing these international borders all the time. And it's really important to consider different fishing dynamics, especially in countries that rely on shark species and shark fishing as a source of employment and food security. So I am currently trying to figure out what those historic trends looked like, and kind of try to establish exactly what the bull shark population looks like, specifically in the marine territory of Mexico, and then see if we can work towards cooperative management in the future so that we have numbers to work off of.
Wow, that is so interesting, because often we think that shark, the research that we see out there in media is, people doing hands-on work, and of course that's still very valuable. But what we don't see very often is people who are actually crunching those numbers about how sharks are moving, because it's not as if when a shark is traveling in international waters, it's carrying a passport and saying, well, I'm from this nationality, I'm over here, or I'm from over there. That brings up a lot of different questions. So speaking of questions, I think we may have some from our audience. So let's bring in one. Here we go. So why are we getting more sharks in Rhode Island, from Emma? So just for context, the both of you are not in Rhode Island. We are here in the Ocean State. But I think with your expertise, let's throw this one over to Triana. Triana, as somebody who studies sharks moving around, are we seeing more sharks over here on our coast?
It's definitely a possibility. It is also, I will say, I am not a movement ecologist, so I can give you some general ideas as to why this is happening, because there are observed increase in shark observations in the North Atlantic, specifically in the United States, and that's usually negatively connected to shark attacks. So there's a lot of kind of misinformation and kind of a general fear of going to the beach or staying by the coasts because of increased shark activity. So there's a lot of things to consider. There have been some studies that are linking climate change to increased range movements for certain species, including black tips and smaller species that do migrate when it is their reproduction season. So it can really just be linked to ecological factors, also meteorological factors, such as climate change. And it can also just be there's more people at the beach, so we're just seeing more activity of more people are seeing more sharks. So it's not so much that they were never there or that there's more. There's definitely a possibility that they've just always been there. And maybe their prey species is moving closer to shore, or they're moving, so sharks will follow their food. Jazz, if you have anything to add to that. I'm just throwing out, general behaviors that we kind of have gathered over the years, because there are people that do specialize in these kinds of studies.
And Jasmin, would you like to add anything? I think it's just really important that we're sort of noticing more about this, right? Our understanding about how sharks live in their habitat is broadening.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that Triana said. Yeah, there's lots of factors as to why sharks could be aggregating in different areas. It also is probably likely that you just see more sharks because there are more out there, more people out there looking at them. So yeah, but it's not something that you should be concerned about. Just like Triana said, the sharks they live there in the ocean. We have this saying of shark infested waters, but actually they're people infested. The sharks live there. The people are the ones that aren't supposed to be there. So yeah, sharks are just living their lives. We have a huge black tip migration that happens off the coast of Florida, and thousands of black tips swim right along the coast, and they're just swimming. They're just living their lives. You stay out of their way, they'll stay out of yours. Most sharks are super shy, so if there's a whole bunch of people in the water, they're probably going to steer clear, just because they don't know what we are, and we could eat them, and lots of people do eat them.
Yep, That's fantastic. So with that, let's sink our teeth into another question. Oh, great. We have a student question here. What made you want to study sharks, and what should I study as a student in middle school or high school to be a shark biologist? Jasmin, let's start with you.
So I actually kind of fell into shark science. I was interested in the ocean, went to a marine science camp, discovered that's something that you could do as a job. There's me, little Jasmin at marine science camp.
Little Jasmin.
And yeah, so then I was like, what? You can do this as a job. Went to college to study marine biology. I met a shark biologist who really just was super excited about sharks. And that got me excited about sharks. So I said, why not? I'll give it a try. I never thought about studying sharks before, but sure. And I fell in love with it. And there's me at Halloween dressed as a hammerhead. So yeah, I fell in love with it and I just stuck with it. And, I tried a lot of other different things and I just kept coming back to sharks. So that's what I stuck with. And so I've been studying sharks ever since. My biggest advice to students in middle and high school that are interested in studying sharks is to learn as much as you can. Go to the library, check out some books, get to your online resources, do research on sharks, and just kind of find out as much as you can about them. And then talk to people about how to get into college and stuff. How do you find colleges? How do you find funding for college? What colleges offer marine science? What schools have researchers that study sharks? Those are things that you want to start looking at. And so that's my advice for people looking to go into shark science.
That's great. And so, Triana, before we get to your answer for this, just want to remind people out there to keep writing in your questions because we have a really good group here that's able to handle these. So, Triana, what would be one thing that you would recommend to somebody in middle school or high school looking to follow your path?
I suffer from too many questions syndrome. So I am constantly coming up with new questions, either related to my studies. So I remember this this picture exactly. I remember this was one of the first experiments we did in elementary school, and we were testing if our water, we had cups of water and they were covered in cellophane, and our teacher was testing us and trying to see if we could figure out if our water level had decreased over a period of 3 days because of natural processes such as evaporation, or she had also gone in and taken water out, so manually. So she was basically testing us to see if we can figure out, based on observations and natural processes, to see if we were, experiencing, if our water had decreased because of evaporation or because she took it out. So I just have always had so many questions, and I still have a lot of questions. And the really fun part about being a scientist or learning how to be a scientist is that you have you're learning tools to answer your own questions. So I definitely agree with what Jazz said. If you have a question, the internet, is a great place to get resources. There are plenty of YouTube videos, free resources that will help you and teach you science or just answers to your questions. And there are universities that do offer mentorship programs to local high schoolers and even undergraduate research opportunities for you to get close to professors, get close to labs, and kind of figure out what you like. So again, Jazz talked about kind of jumping from, different not research topics, but different different activities, research activities. And I can say the same. I worked in oyster health, eel recruitment, dolphin surveys. I've sea turtle nesting. I've worked in a bunch of different things, but I always went back to sharks. So it's cool because we don't know everything that we could know about sharks. So questions are abound in shark science.
And it's good to have people who have, what did you call it? Too many questions syndrome?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. I love that. I think we're all in good company there. But I think you bring up something really important in this idea of both you and Jasmine have brought up, you keep coming back to sharks. Well, every year in this country, we have a full week or more. It seems like over a month now that we actually dedicate to sharks, shark science, and the people who are dedicating their lives to this. However, what we end up seeing is when the attention fades and we sort of reflect on this, we're not seeing as much diversity. We're not seeing people of color as much as we could. And these sort of reflect, as we were talking about in the introduction, sort of a lack of representation that can lead to a myriad of different issues. So you two are both doing something about that. And especially like you're coming back and you're doing it through your science and you're doing it in a really impactful way. So Jasmine, let's talk about MISS. Let's talk about minorities in shark science, because just recently in June of this year, you and some others decided to start a group with some really ambitious goals. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you're trying to address by creating a community like this?
Yeah, so me and three others, Amani Weber-Schultz, Carly Jackson, and Jada Elcock, we founded Minorities in Shark Sciences. And we founded this organization so that we could create a network of people, of women of color that are interested in shark science, because we all, before finding each other, felt like we were alone. And it's really hard to feel like you're the first person to do something. And so whenever you talk about things like Shark Week and Shark Fest and things like that, not having a lot of people of color, it's hard to imagine yourself doing something that you haven't seen someone like you do. And it's really hard to be in a space and not have anyone that identifies with you, identifies with your background, has the same life experiences as you, when you're trying to live your life on top of doing science. I think a lot of times people forget that scientists are people. We aren't just going around doing science. I have to live my life as a Black woman as well, which is an extra thing that has to happen. And so I can't stop being a Black woman because I'm a scientist. And so we created this group so people would feel supported and feel like they're being heard and their issues in their life are being heard. And I just wanted to create an environment where people felt supported, where they saw themselves represented, where we would be able to kind of show people, young people, K through 12, that there are people of color doing shark science and that they can too. And one of the other things that we're trying to tackle is trying to mitigate some of the barriers that are keeping people of color out of shark science by providing mentor opportunities, networking experiences, providing cost-free research and field experiences, because typically, unfortunately, in our field, a lot of these things cost money or they're unpaid experiences. And so if you're not financially stable, it's really hard for you to be able to do these kinds of things that you really need to succeed in shark science. So we're trying to make shark science very accessible and welcoming to all the different people. And so we are very excited to have this program. And so that's kind of why we founded it. And Tree can talk about what it's like to be a member, because she is a member of Minorities in Shark Sciences.
Yeah, Triana, tell us about how you're meeting this moment through your membership.
So I am eternally grateful that Jasmin, Amani, Carly, and Jada took the time to really bring attention to a big problem that we're seeing right now. And it almost seemed like the timing was perfect. Because as a first generation Mexican American, and I've experienced very unique, educational experiences, and I've experienced, a lot of discrimination because I am a woman and I am also a first generation American. So being an American and then going to grad school abroad really opens my eyes to how science is perceived outside of the United States. I realized that there's almost a bias, or there isn't almost, there is a bias for either students or researchers from outside of the United States to partner with scientists in the United States so that they can have a higher chance of getting published in higher impact journals. This is incredibly problematic because it dismisses the efforts and the knowledge that is coming from other countries that maybe aren't English speaking or perceived as developing or don't have the infrastructure or don't have the resources, when that is absolutely not true. So I really love MISS, and I really strive to kind of bring attention to the topic of decolonizing science, as kind of intense and, buzzwordy that seems. It really is a problem that, Asian countries are facing, African countries are facing, Central and South American countries are facing. A lot of papers will get desk rejected because the English isn't up to par. And then you look at these labs that spend years trying to collect data and learn more about the natural world, that maybe their English isn't their first language and they want to publish in a high impact journal, but they don't have the resources and they don't have the support to either properly or get help to translate into more colloquial English or more appropriate jargon, scientific jargon in English. So I really want to bring attention to this because it severely impacts the way these other countries perceive American academia and academia as a whole. So I think MISS is a great way for international women in science to connect and be able to really bring their talents to the table and have an opportunity and have a chair at the table and really fight for their right to sit at the table with everyone else.
Well, thanks to the both of you for that. It seems like you're taking it upon yourselves to really, and this is something, Jasmin, we've talked about, and I'm learning from you and Triana as well, this idea of reaching behind you to pull others up and setting up this pathway so that people can follow in your footsteps as you can look out and present more of an opportunity to find different perspectives and to find different career pathways where people can see themselves in what you're doing, and not only see themselves, but really identify and relate to it at an intimate level, something that impacts your career choices. And this is really important stuff. So I just wanted to thank you. And, we're getting some questions in from the audience in terms of some different things that this is more on the science end, but different things that the audience and people who are watching can potentially be doing. And because this is the Ocean Classroom, we can take this opportunity and kind of delve into like, okay, here's your assignment, audience. Here's what you're going to do. Our answer is going to get into this a little bit. So what can people do out there in terms of citizen science? How can people contribute into understanding more and really broadening our perspective around shark science, and possibly even let's bring in the representation as well, and helping represent not only the science, but also the people who do the research?
Jasmin.
Let's start with, Jasmin. Sorry, there's that other part.
Yeah, so citizen science and community-based science is super important. I think there's this idea that a scientist looks like this person in a lab coat that has a PhD and that you have to be that person to do science. That is not true. You can do science right now, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter how old you are. You can do science. Science is asking a question and looking at the natural world to make observations and do experiments to answer that question. And so when you do that, you're being a scientist. So all of you students out there that are watching this, you absolutely can do science right now. If you're on the coast, what that might look like is going to your local beach, picking up plastic, counting how much plastic is on the beach. Maybe you do something to try and encourage people to not litter, and you see if the amount of litter on the beaches decreases. You can do all kinds of things. If you're not on the coast, there are still things that you can do to be involved in science and to engage with science. And so I definitely recommend you guys going to your teachers, asking them about, giving them ideas of, I'd like to design a science experiment. Can you help me? I want to do science. There's a lot of things where we have people take pictures of things in their environment. There's an app called iNaturalist, which I highly recommend teachers use, where they can go out and take pictures of plants and animals and identify them, and they can track what animals are in their yard or in their neighborhood, things like that. If you're on the coast, you can do the same thing in the ocean. Go to tide pools, look at what's in there. Are there starfish? Are there hermit crabs? Do the tide pools look different at different times of the day? These are all things that you can do right now. And then, of course, one way that you can engage with science is not only by doing your own science, but checking in with others, other scientists, to see if there's any projects that you can be a part of. A lot of people have science experiments where they need the community to help them collect data, because we can't be everywhere at once. So that's the way that you can get involved in science, and that's your homework. Go do some science today.
Triana, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting because there are scientists who actually cross disciplines. So specifically in fishery science, which is my main focus, I see a lot of people crossing into different disciplines such as sociology, economics, anthropology, and these are all really important topics that help us scientists better understand why things happen the way they happen. So science is a great thing to be passionate about, but it doesn't have to be the only thing you're passionate about. So there are plenty of artists, scientific illustrators that have amazing jobs and work in illustrating all the images that you see in your science textbooks. There are photographers, amazing photographers that had a passion for photography and nature and get published in National Geographic. Never let your passions simmer away just because you think that you can't incorporate it into a career or into a future. I think it's important to try everything, because you can't say you don't like something if you don't try it, So if you love drawing, then keep drawing, and maybe in the future, if you go into science, we can use more scientific illustrators, or we can work on people that work on, children's books, children's science books. So I think it's important to incorporate everything that makes us into people. Just as Jasmin said, scientists are also people. And, enjoy what you do is also the biggest takeaway, I think. So, I mean, ask yourself a question, maybe do a quick Google of what is already known, and then see if you can prove that, if you can duplicate that experiment. If you, the tree in your backyard, you notice that there's always birds that come every year and put their nests in your backyard tree. Okay, well, when is that? Does that coincide with their migratory patterns, or does it coincide with their nesting habits? Like, what materials do they use to build their nests? Science is everywhere, and you can ask yourself questions, and there's plenty of resources, and there's people to ask. The internet is a great thing, but use it wisely. And I think, science is great because the limit doesn't exist. You know, there's no such thing as science with or without something, I think.
Thank you both. I mean, it's so important to also, one thing that you both are doing is you're asking those questions. And then if you're not seeing answers to those directly, you're also taking active participation in trying to change something that's important to you, which would be representation and creating MIS and being members of MIS. And now you're creating a more broader pathway for people to step up and for people, again, to reach behind and pull others up behind you. So thank you both. I want to really take a moment and thank you both for joining us today, and really everybody out there for coming in and listening to this conversation in today's GSO Ocean Classroom. So I just want to plug quickly, you have a social event coming up, right? Miss Elasmo is representing something. There's an Elasmo week coming up, right? I think we were just seeing it on the bottom. That's coming up soon.
Yeah, so the September 6th, beginning September 6th through the 13th, there's going to be a event that Miss Elasmo is partnering with the founders of Elasmo Week. This is the first time they're doing it, and it's going to highlight scientists from all over the world talking about their research. And so if you guys are interested in learning more about sharks and their relatives, I highly recommend that you check that out. You can see that all of them will be live streamed on the Minorities in Shark Science's YouTube channel. And we're going to have a broad range of scientists, and we're going to make sure that you're getting some quality science and that everyone has an opportunity to see themselves doing science. That's a big part of why the founders of Elasmo Week created Elasmo Week, to create an alternative to the Shark Week and Shark Fest and things like that, where you don't see as much diversity. So they're working really hard to bring in diverse speakers from all over the world to talk and engage with the public, and it should be really exciting. So I highly recommend you guys check that out.
Oh, looking forward to that, Jasmin. And thank you, Jasmin. Thank you, Triana. So for our next GSO Classroom Live coming up September 10th, it's going to be an episode focused on estuaries and really where the tide meets the stream. So there's more to look out for there. And again, I want to thank everybody out there. I wanted to thank the Devereux Ocean Foundation. Jasmin and Triana, you've been fantastic. I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors and really keep going with what you're doing. So thank you to everybody out there. And for that, I think we'll close out and we'll say see you later.